Hi guys, so we are on, believe it or not, the last lesson that we're gonna do this year, and it is graphing rational functions. So we're putting it all together. We've learned how to find the domain, vertical asymptotes, holes, horizontal asymptotes or oblique asymptotes, y-intercepts, x-intercepts. We've learned how to find all of that, and now we're going to put that all together in the graph form. So we find all that information, we put it together on a graph, and that's what today's lesson is all about. So we're combining the last 4 weeks worth of stuff into one. So here we go. We're going to show you how to do this. I'm going to do 4 problems. You're going to do 4 problems. There'll be a short Delta Math assignment, and that will be it, guys. And then yeah. So there we go. So we're going to work through this just like what we did on the part. So we're going to find the domain first. So I'm going to take my function. What I'm going to do first, what I like to do first, is I'm going to factor my equation. I always like to factor my equation because it makes it easier. So there's nothing on the top to do, so my numerator stays the same. By denominator, I can factor. I need 2 numbers that multiply to be -6 and add to be 1. Well, I think that is 3 and -2. So that factors to x plus 3 times x minus 2. Okay? So and after I factored my equation, both the numerator and denominator, in this case I can't do anything with the numerator, I'm going to find my domain. And that means I set my, like it says here, I set my denominator equal to 0. Okay? And your problems are going to be just like this. I'm going to upload them to into the program. So sorry, upload them into the program one problem at a time, and then or just one sheet at a time, and then you'll graph it as a draw it problem. So here we go. We're going to find the denominator. Find the domain. Whew, I'm doing good. So I'm going to take my denominator, which says x plus 3 times x minus 2, and I'm going to set it equal to 0. So that means I have 2 things multiplied together. That means one of those things has to be 0. So that either means that x plus 3 equals 0 or x minus 2 equals 0. So if that's true, that means that x is going to equal -3 or, and x equals 2. Okay? So now that we have that part done, I'm going to write my domain. And I noticed some of you guys were saying all but all real numbers except for those 2. We really need to write it. We can write it that way, but for those of you going to calculus, you really need to write it this way. And actually, a lot of you were writing it negative infinity to -3, right? We go from least to greatest, joined with -3 to 2, and none of these are included, joined with 2 to infinity. So there's my domain. Okay? So now the next one, vertical asymptotes, is pretty easy once we've done the domain, because my vertical asymptote goes with my domain. Well, I have a vertical asymptote. I don't have anything that crossed out, so I don't have any holes. Let's go there first. Since I didn't have anything that canceled out in my equation, I have no holes, none. Okay? So I do have vertical asymptotes where my domain, where my x's are in my domain. So I do want to just remember on my domain, x cannot be -3 and it cannot be 2, because that's where it makes the denominator 0 at. So my vertical asymptotes would be at x equals -3 and x equals 2. Okay, so I have 2 vertical asymptotes. And remember, a vertical asymptote, a line can approach but not cross. So now we're going to look at my oblique or horizontal asymptotes, or slant or horizontal asymptotes. And I am going to recopy my equation down here. My equation is f of x equals 1 over x squared plus x minus 6. And when I'm doing this, I want to find my degree. So my degree is here and here. So the degree in my in my numerator, degree, equals 0, because I have no variables in the numerator. And the degree of my denominator is 2. And we know that 0 is less than 2, and that means that n is less than m. So that's case 1. If you remember from last time, we had 3 cases where n is less than m, n equals m, and n is greater than m. And when n is less than m, my horizontal asymptote is y equals 0. So I have a asymptote at y equals 0. Okay, and now I want to find my y-intercept. Well, how do I find my y-intercept? Well, I set x equal to 0. So I'm going to find f of 0. That means wherever there's an x in my equation, I'm going to put 0. So I've got 1 over 0 squared plus 0 minus 6, which is 1 over negative 6. So I've got a y-intercept at 0, negative 1/6. Okay? And then the next thing I need to do is find my x-intercept. So my x-intercept is where y equals 0, where f of x, I just want to kind of highlight this part, sorry, where I set y equal to 0. Okay, so that means that 0 is going to equal 1 over x squared plus x minus 6. Let me rewrite that one right there. Okay, x squared. So if I turn this into a fraction and I cross multiply, I get 1 equals 0, because 0 times anything is 0. So that's cannot be possible. 1 cannot equal 0. So that means for my x-intercept, because that is impossible, I have none. There's no x-intercepts. Okay, great. So now on this graphic organizer we have for this, it says I have to find other points if needed and to graph it. So I'm going to show you how I decide which other points to pick, and I am going to pick some. So I'm going to draw a little table here. Whew. I don't know how many little slots I'm going to need. We'll just leave it there. So I'm going to draw in all my information I just found. Okay, all the information I found. I found a vertical asymptote at x equals negative 3, and asymptotes are drawn in with a dotted line. So I've got one asymptote there, and I've got one at 2. So I've got one there. And then I've got a horizontal asymptote at 0, y equals 0. So that is also dotted. Okay, and then I have a y-intercept at 0, negative 1/6. I'm going to do that in a different, my points I'm going to do in a different color. So it's probably closer to the line than that, but you know, we're sketching here. So 0, 1, 6, and I don't have any x-intercepts. So there we go. So I'm actually going to need some more points to tell me where on my graph to put stuff. So I'm going to choose values for x and substitute them into for f of x. And remember, my equation is f of x equals 1 over x squared plus x minus 6. And I can just put that right into my calculator. Remember, if I'm going to put that in my calculator, this needs to go into parentheses. Okay, so you can get the correct answer. So here we go. How do I decide which values to plug in? So I need one, and I'm going to turn this into a highlighter here. I need one on this side of my asymptote. So I need to know what's happening on this side of my asymptote. I need to know what's happening on this side of 0 and on this side of 0. And I need to know what's happening on this side of my asymptote. So I need 4 different points. So I need 4 values. So I'm just going to pick an x value. So for this one, I'm going to choose negative 4. And then in this area over here, this area here, so in this area I chose -4. In this area I'm going to choose -2. And in this area I'm going to choose 1. And in this area I'm going to choose 3. I just chose the closest ones to the asymptotes just to make it a little easier, okay? And then for the -2 and 1, I just chose the ones closest to the asymptote because that kind of gives me an idea of the shape of it. So I'm just going to plug -4 in. So in my calculator, plug it in, and I get a value of 0.17. And I plug -2 in, and I'm going to get a value of -0.25. And if you don't trust me, go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and plug your values in and see what you get. And then I get a value of -0.25, 0.17. Okay, so let's go ahead and plot those points. So -4.17. So that tells me what my graph is going to look like on this side. It's going to go like this along here, and then it's going to go shoot up, and it's going to be like this because it's not going to cross the asymptote. So it looks like this. And then I'm going to go ahead and graph the end one. So at 3, it's also at 0.175. So it's going to do the same thing. Okay? So here we go. There we go. Okay. And then we want to graph my other 2 points. So -2, -0.25. So I'm somewhere in there. And -1, -0.25, somewhere in there. So everything here is in the lower quadrant. So we're going to go up, over, it's kind of flattish, and back down. So it kind of looks like that. So that's what the graph looks like. Now, if you want to check yourself, you can go ahead into Desmos and go ahead and check it. And you put it into Desmos the same way that I put it here. 1 divided by parenthesis x squared plus x minus 6. So put that into Desmos that way, and you should get this graph into various graphing calculators. It should be very similar to the same thing. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go to the next one. Notice, I'm sorry that it's taken a while. I want to make sure that you guys get how to do this. So this video is going to be a little bit longer. I apologize for that since we have 4 problems to do. So here we go on to the next one. I will go a little faster through this one. I wanted to go a little slower for the first one.